This is a video about a huge issue. Good way to start the video. This is a video about a huge issue in my life. I don't know how many people struggle with this issue. I don't know. Every single relationship I have ever been in, including short-term relationships, girlfriends that only lasted a few months, every single relationship I have had the girlfriend say to me that they felt intellectually inferior, that they felt they couldn't keep up, that they felt stupid. I do not mean this is some kind of Freudian interpretation of something that was hinted at. I don't mean that this is subtext. I mean they sat down at some point, one time or another, or maybe 10 times, maybe repeatedly, and said, they felt stupid, that they were drowning or losing self-esteem, that this was a problem for them being in the relationship, even though those same women, every single one of them, chose me in the first place because they thought I was intelligent. That's what I tell myself. Sometimes when one of the relationships broke down, sometimes it really has been, we're looking back at, you realize these women, it had nothing to do with my intelligence. I just have, I'm wondering who I'm talking to. Melissa's just off camera here, my current girlfriend, who's no exception to these issues. I mean, it's been a struggle in this relationship too, but it's a struggle we actually all, learn from and gain a lot of positive things. It's a struggle worth doing. So I got a question from a viewer. I'll digress back again. A viewer I'm going to call Daniel wrote in and he said, I want your advice on something. Do you think, based on your experience and our somewhat similar personalities, that I could be content in a relationship with an overall intellectually mediocre woman as my romantic partner? Now, I really do. This particular guy, Daniel, I do consider him really quite brilliant. I consider him an extraordinarily gifted person in terms of the raw materials he's got to work with, and he's also someone with quite a lot of knowledge, of the type of knowledge I value from my biased perspective. Just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, brilliance is in the eye of the beholder. I care about stuff like history and politics and languages. Maybe he's terrible at math. I doubt it. He might be lacking. Maybe he's a terrible driver. I've never seen. Maybe he has road rage. Whatever. But in the areas of intelligence I care about, I both think he's very intelligent and that he's a real intellectual, and he's someone who's going to go on to, he's going to continue to care about and learn about history and politics and these types of things. So, look, I'm going to start with broad brushstrokes, then we're going to get into finer brushstrokes. It's really hard to be honest with the other people in your life about what your emotional needs are. It's really hard, but at least we have a bit of a cultural discourse about that. I need to feel respected. I need to feel loved. I need to feel appreciated. I need you to actually take the time to thank me for doing something. Those kinds of discussions now in 2018, they've become mainstream. And I think back in 1968, they were not. I think there was a long struggle between kind of pop psychology and, sort of culture of silence, a culture of not showing your suffering, not sharing your suffering, and not trying to conceal any kind of weakness. Again, it may be different from one culture to the next, but the idea now that your husband or wife, your boyfriend or girlfriend is someone you really do share your emotional needs with, your sorrows with, and that you look at them and say, look, if you can't provide this, we got to split up, because emotional needs are something you need to communicate, and then you need to communicate if the other person's failing to live up to what you see as their side of the bargain, their responsibility. And if you don't communicate what your emotional needs are, you can't punish them for failing to live up to that. You can't skip to the punishment stage. You can't, same actually even with being a classroom teacher. I say that all the time. You can't punish students for breaking unwritten rules. You can't punish students for failing to deliver on an assignment or something you didn't explain to them. There you go. That's my philosophy of teaching, and I know a lot, especially at university level, a lot of teachers do not live up to that very simple philosophy. So likewise, in a relationship, you both play the role of the teacher, and you both play the role of the student as these things come and go. As difficult as it is to communicate the emotional needs, I think we really lack culturally any kind of a script, any kind of preparation for communicating intellectual needs. And I now have a lot of practice at age 40. And I can remember, I'm cursed with a very clear memory, I can remember how difficult it was to communicate that to my first long-term girlfriend. And communicate it, I did. I mean, I can remember really saying, look, this is what I'm reading. What are you reading? This is what I'm working on. This is the language I'm learning. And, what are you doing? So, I mean, one of my former girlfriends, she was aspiring to be a painter. And I provided for her, economically and in terms of the setup in our apartment. I provided her basically with a studio to paint in and set up. And, I was doing a lot of things to encourage her. And it's like, well, look, if I see you're not really putting the hours in, you're not really working on painting, what's my role here and what's your role? Do you want me to be asking you, what you're doing intellectually or not, And there's a reciprocal element of that too, Obviously, I want to be with someone who at least over coffee and over lunch is going to talk to me about what I'm reading, or who's going to be reading some of the essays I'm writing. I mean, back then, it was before YouTube, so I was writing and publishing informal articles and once in a while more formal articles. I was doing research and writing of various kinds. Are you with someone who can participate in that? Are you with someone who can challenge you to achieve a higher level, who can... or even who can criticize which books you're reading. Someone who's, oh, come on, this is a really kind of, you're reading a rinky-dink introductory book on this. When are you going to move on to something more challenging, whatever? If that's what you need the other person to be, you've got to communicate that to them. You've got to communicate the extent to which they're living up to it or not living up to it. You got to thank them when they do. You got to give them positive feedback. You got to say, hey, wow, thanks. I really appreciate you pointing out to me like that my writing was bad in that essay, or that I failed to explain that point in a way an outsider can understand, or whatever it is. When they do live up to it, you need positive feedback and thanking them, and you got to be honest with yourself, about what's there and what's not. Now, okay, as my life has gone on, my emotional needs have decreased and decreased. It may be hard for Melissa to imagine, but I mean, sure, if you go, when I was 16, wow, the emotional needs for the role of the woman in it. I mean, I was really damaged by the upbringing I had. I was really damaged by the parents and the family I happened to be born into. I was really damaged by the education I had and didn't have, and so on. So the emotional needs I had were really, really high for the woman. 16, up to, let's say, 23 or something, really, really high. The intellectual needs I had, whether or not I could express them that well, whether or not I could cooperate and collaborate that well, were really high, right? I mean, just think of it, sir. I mean, in terms of what I literally have in arm's reach, you guys know I'm still working on Aristotle. I have textbooks here for Chinese that are sitting around on the desk. I have books about politics and history within arm's reach and stuff. For me at age 40, I don't need to talk to anybody about what I'm reading. I don't need guidance or feedback or positive, or even a sounding board. Like even when you sit down and have lunch with somebody and they don't have anything to say, but they're at least listening to you and asking questions for clarification or asking, what did you like about the book or something? Yeah, at 16, that can be crucial. It can be absolutely crucial to your intellectual development. And again, whether that's 16 to 26 or whatever, it can be so important to have someone just listening to you talk about your intellectual aspirations and interests. Whether or not you think of that as an intellectual need, you probably do have that kind of, and you are probably playing that role for the other person too. Whatever it is they're doing, intellectually. Now, of course, I'm tempted to here jump into, learning languages, learning really hard languages like Chinese. But in some ways, that's an extraordinary example that can't apply to things. But whether it's learning a language or learning to play music, how different it is to do that alone, completely alone, as opposed to doing it with some participation and positive feedback from someone who loves you. That's a huge difference. Learning to play the keyboard, learning to play the trombone, learning to read and write Chinese. And you know what? It's at a higher level with history, politics, philosophy, the life of the mind, with anything intellectual. It is, because that's the loneliest art form of all, and it's the most immediate. I remember my father always used to say that. He used to say the hardest art form is acting. And here's why. He said, if you're a painter, you can wake up feeling like crap, feeling like you've wasted your whole life, that you should quit, that you should just get a job in a law firm or real estate, that you should give it up. And then you can look at the painting on your wall, or you can look at a sketch you did stuck to your fridge with a magnet, and you can say, wow, I've still got it. Like, I've still got something I can do. And, you can be totally demoralized as a musician, but you can stand there in the bathroom, in the shower, or whatever, and sing or play your instrument or whatever, and you can hear your own voice back, and you can think, wow, I've still got it. And he said, when you're an actor and you stand there in front of the bathroom mirror looking at yourself, what have I got? What do I have? What's my art form? And when you're a 16-year-old kid reading philosophy, reading politics, the life of the mind, whatever it is, all this kind of stuff, what have you got? It's the most immediate, most impalpable thing. At least as an actor, there's that little bit of a distance between your brain and the expression in your face. In some ways, your face is your instrument, right? Your face is your trombone, your face is your canvas. But the life of the mind, what have I got? What am I doing here? Having someone you love, even maybe an intellectually mediocre person, but he's giving you positive feedback, that could be very, very important. So look, what I need from a partner at age 40, my needs are very low, compared to what they used to be. Because now I have so much depth of experience and self-confidence and ability and education. Of course, mostly self-taught, mostly autodidact, mostly self-taught, but I also have a lot of formal education. I can teach myself Chinese alone in a closet. You guys already know this, but I taught myself Laotian while chopping firewood and made my own textbooks. I've done all this stuff myself. I've worked on so many languages and philosophies and whatever. I've done a lot of stuff alone, and I've become a bit of a cold learning machine where I can intellectually thrive in a vacuum with nobody to love me, or with somebody to love me, but who's not involved in that way intellectually. I'm going to go out on a limb here, dear viewer, and say you don't want that. There's a reason why people would rather pay $50,000 to learn a language like Laotian in a university in Fresno instead of chopping their own firewood, living in a hut, getting their own chalkboard, getting their own textbook, and doing it themselves alone. It's really, really hard doing those things alone. And, having one person who loves you involved is infinitely more than zero. Okay, this is the real world. Most people in love, in matters of the heart, take whatever they can get and get whatever they can take. Do you have 10 people to choose between? Do you have 10 people who can really love you? I don't mean 10 people who will sleep with you. 10 people will just have sex with you and pack up and move out the next day, Someone who really has what it takes to love you, to really be a part of your life in a constructive, positive way. If the only person you've got who's indicating they want to try to, build a life with you, they want to try to love you, they want to try to support you, if that person is intellectually mediocre, you can try, and you have to make it your absolute top priority to communicate to them what are your emotional needs, what are your intellectual needs, and they've got to do the same back for you. It's possible this woman, assuming it's woman, these women plural, that Daniel is considering dating. It's possible they chose you, Daniel, because they have intellectual needs too. Melissa, one of the benefits she gets from this relationship is someone to motivate her and direct her and reward her for the reading she's doing. You know, Melissa comes out of a background where she's aware. She just didn't learn that much in high school. She just didn't learn that much in university. Came up the other day. I asked her, when was the first time you even heard the name Mao Zedong? When was the first time you heard the name Stalin? And this stuff, these huge, towering parts of recent, political history that were totally lacking from her education and upbringing. And her going from being a kind of isolated, sheltered person from Detroit to being a cosmopolitan, kind of politically savvy, well-educated person. Almost nobody will put an ad on, what are the dating apps? Tinder is a dating app. No one's going to put an advertisement on Tinder saying, yeah, I'm single. What I really want is someone who can help me develop from being a kind of isolated, poorly educated person into being a sophisticated, cosmopolitan person. But that's what a lot of women want. Sure. It's what a lot of men want too. I mean, again, we could be talking about a gay relationship where it's two men and the gender inequality is taken out of this. And we could be talking about a relationship where the woman is older and the man is younger. All these combinations. And you could be an older guy, but getting older is not getting wiser. You could be an older guy with a low level of education. You're with a more educated woman. And exactly part of why you want to be with her is because she provides a kind of stimulus and motivation for you to be all you can be, for you to develop more, to get more out of yourself. And, there's a difference here. The emotional needs we think of as fundamentally comforting and gratifying when they're met. And never forget this, the intellectual needs are exhausting. Right? It's hard work. And it's not about feeling good about yourself. It's not. It's about pushing your limits and learning from the experience and failing and failing and failing until you gain proficiency, and being wrong and finding out that you're wrong and noticing that you're wrong, and maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend's pointing out that you're wrong, then noticing it and thinking about what you're doing wrong, learning from the mistake. That's the process. And I think one of the real signs of being an intellectual is that you realize this doesn't end when you come home and take off your hat and hang up your coat. That your home life in your apartment with your boyfriend or girlfriend, this is maybe the most important laboratory of all. You're going to do more learning in the bedroom than at the library long term over the years and decades of your life ahead. So if you don't have an intellectually gratifying, stimulating, motivating relationship, it's just going to be a huge disadvantage in your life in every way. Say again, most people take whatever they can get and get whatever they can take. If you've met someone and they really think they've got what it takes to love you, that's number one job requirement. And at any age, they may not know themselves what they're capable of yet. So if you give them a chance, maybe intellectually, they can surprise you.